All right. Hello, everyone. This is Laszlo. It's good to have everyone here, and especially Kostis, my friend, who agreed to accept this invitation. So this is going to be a stream about Flux and ArgoCD, and the fact that I know probably less about ArgoCD that I am willing to admit. So thank you, Kostis, for joining here and sharing your ArgoCD knowledge.
No, I think you need to tell people the full story, okay? So the full story is that my good friend Laszlo, thinks that Flux is the best thing ever. He loves it, yes. But then he looked at the numbers of the CNCF and he saw project number 1 is Kubernetes, which makes sense. Project number 2 is OpenTelemetry, which makes sense. And then project number 3 is ArgoCD. And he said, let's find out more about ArgoCD. And he called me. That's how it started.
Yeah, let's see about this. But long story short, I'm happy that we are doing this. And yeah, so it's been like a few years I looked at ArgoCD, and honestly, when I got started, Flux seemed like more approachable for me. And ever since, I'm like fully entrenched in Flux. And what we are going to do today is basically, yeah, so we have a short agenda. We're going to just talk briefly about GitOps. I think Kostis is going to take the lead on that one. He has some interesting things to share. Just brief project philosophies, like what's the difference about these tools, like from the outset. And I think Kostis is going to take the first chance to show ArgoCD, a couple of use cases and whatever he thinks worth sharing. And then I'm going to do some FluxCD. And I think we're going to focus on differences a lot at the end of the stream. So did I miss anything, Kostis?
Conclusion. There is no conclusion. Which project is better? This is what is missing.
I think everybody knows that, or people are going to draw their own conclusions. We certainly have already. So, but who knows? Let's see. All right. So, if you want to share your screen, maybe we can get started with GitOps and the site you wanted to show us, the Open GitOps one.
Yep. So let me share my screen.
And then I'm adding it to the stage. Yeah, we have it.
So I think it's important to mention this. First of all, a very brief intro is that essentially both projects, ArgoCD and Flux, follow the GitOps principles. So whatever project you're using, the end result is exactly the same. Now, if you don't know the GitOps principles, you should. And right now, we are happy because there is finally a site for it. Yes. So if you go to opengitops.dev, you will find the official website of the GitOps working group, which defines exactly what GitOps is and also what GitOps isn't. So if you heard about GitOps and didn't know what you're doing is GitOps or not, find the details here. And I think it's also important to mention that this site is actually co-created by several companies. So Codefresh is the company that I work, and we have an enterprise product on top of ArgoCD. It also includes, Red Hat, which is also big on ArgoCD as well, and it has Weaveworks, which is the main company behind Flux. So essentially, it's something that we all agree. There isn't like, a GitOps website for ArgoCD and a GitOps website for Flux. No, this is the GitOps website, and it's super simple. It just explains the 4 principles of GitOps. And usually when I ask people if they follow these principles, essentially they follow 1, 2, and maybe 3. That's it. They don't reach number 4. There is also a big discussion that I don't know if we'll have today whether Terraform is GitOps or not. We will see if we will have this discussion. But you should definitely know this. And this website is also completely open. It's backed by GitHub. So you can go in GitHub. And if you have like a suggestion on how something works, you can just go there. There are also Slack channels in the CNCF Slack about GitOps. So you can join there as well and talk about GitOps. And they are neutral. Like, people come ask questions about ArgoCD and Flux, and usually maybe we give them a quick answer. Then if they need something deep, we say, go to the Flux channel for Flux details, or the ArgoCD channel for ArgoCD details. But if you're just interested in the concept, you should join there as well. And there are, meetings, marketing efforts, and so on and so on. And in December 6th, there is also the next GitOpsCon, which is virtual this time. There was GitOpsCon US, which was an in-person event, but now it's in Europe, so European times, yay! And it's virtual. I think there is a small price to pay, but it's so that you can, ask questions during the sessions and stuff like this. Even if you don't want, to pay money and join, wait until the recordings are out, and you can imagine the sessions are, both for ArgoCD and Flux or other GitOps tools. There are other GitOps tools as well. So this is the place that you should be if you want to follow GitOps in general. So everybody loves everybody. We are on the same, let's say, GitOps boat.
Exactly. And the website, you mentioned the GitOps working group. It's part of the CNCF, right? So this is the tag application delivery subgroup, or
yeah, it's completely official. And actually, I think there was some, I don't remember, like GitOpsCon. I think in some case it was part of KubeCon, like it was day one, and now it's separate. ArgoCon has, its own conference, so this replaced it. Like everything is official. Everybody knows about it. It's not like something hidden or magic.
Yeah, and we are talking about this because this is a slide I recently found, which was a survey about 2022 and made by the CNCF. So this is a CNCF official thing. And this chart shows that basically among the organizations they asked, 80% of the companies are doing GitOps. Either they just started or they are fully in production, but GitOps is the thing. So I guess it's good that we talk about, like the both two tools, the main tools, because it's really GitOps that is out there, and I guess homegrown solutions, or I'm not sure, Kostis, if you are sharing this view, but it's really GitOps what everybody does these days.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention this. Like it's not like there are now 5 or 6 competing ideologies about deployment, and GitOps is one of them. And we need to explain to people why it's the best. There isn't anything else right now. Like people say GitOps is the next big thing, and nobody, at least yet, has come out forward and said, no, GitOps sucks. Here is my own best solution that it's better than GitOps, and this is why you should do it. It didn't happen yet. And actually, I think one of the problems of explaining GitOps, and this is why I showed, the website, is that people, they found about DevOps that ends in ops, and then they found about GitOps that ends in ops, and they say, DevOps, GitOps. Okay, GitOps is the next thing after DevOps. No, it's not. Or, hey, I just spent $1 million to migrate my team to DevOps. Now I need to spend another $1 million to migrate my team in GitOps. No, it's not like this. DevOps is a mindset. GitOps is like a specific deployment practice. It's something solid. And if you remember the website, it has principles that you should follow.
Awesome. And we picked ArgoCD and Flux for a reason. So those are the two main tools. So this is from a micro survey CNCF did just like a month ago. And this is sort of the landscape of like, how many people said like what tools they use among, I think, like 200 people, or maybe this is not percentage. No, this is actual respondents. But so you can see like ArgoCD and Flux going head to head, and we're going to talk about that a little later as well. You want to take the philosophies part?
Yeah, I can take that. I think it's important. Remember I said in the beginning that we are all following GitOps, but the way we reach the end result is a bit different. If you search right now in Google, like ArgoCD versus Flux, you will find several articles, and unfortunately, all of them or most of them are obsolete. Like they have old information, and even the video that you're watching right now, after 6 months, it will be obsolete as well, because as you can imagine, the two projects advance forward all the time, and they add new features, and they copy stuff from each other. Yes, that's true, and I admit it. But I think it's important to talk about the mindset, because the mindset between the two projects is a bit different. And, you can tell me your opinion about Flux, but I can tell you what I think from the things I've seen so far. Like I'm not an expert on Flux, but I've played around with it. So the ArgoCD Mindeset is essentially what people call the kitchen set. You get everything, just get everything. So we give you like ArgoCD, which is a platform. It has a big UI, and UI it's like one of the important selling points for people. And it does everything that you need to do. It offers its security on its own, like completely separate, for Kubernetes security. It has plugins, and we are going to talk about plugins. You can also change how the UI works. It supports a lot of stuff, while Flux has the exact, let's say, opposite direction. It's not a huge platform. It's a set of reusable blocks. And you are supposed to say, oh, I need this, I need this, I need this. And you take the blocks and you create a solution on your own. And actually what most people do is they embed Flux is something else. So not many people, see Flux as a solution that you install, and you're ready. You get Flux, and then you either build something on top or you connect with something on top. Flux is also hidden in several solutions. So maybe, you're using a cloud vendor for doing deployments. And even though you don't know this as a user, behind the scenes, they use, Flux to do stuff. So all the decisions that you're going, to see in the two projects and all the different features come from this difference in ideology, where, with Flux, you get little pieces and you can connect them together or get only what you want and get exactly what you want. With ArgoCD, you get everything. And then some people want actually to remove stuff, which is pretty funny. I can tell you right now, like if you look, there is an ArgoCD core project, which essentially the description is get ArgoCD with less stuff. That's the description.
Exactly. Yeah. And also there is option now to do headless ArgoCD, so without UI as well.
That's the one that I'm talking about. Like there are two or three options that you remove stuff from ArgoCD. While if you look at, let's say, the Flux material, it's small blocks, and then you say get this, they get this.
Yeah.
So that's on my view is the difference in the ideology between the two projects.
And actually there are viewers who are derailing our conversation, and they want us to do Flamingo, which is like a crossover project. So Engin was throwing the bomb, and also like David was, hey guys, David was asking about Flamingo as well. So things went, like to such a place where we can even, integrate the two projects. I haven't tried it myself, and we're not going to talk about Flamingo here, but...
No, we're going to talk about Flamingo. It's the best thing ever. No. But wait, we need to talk a bit about the history, okay? And I know this wasn't in the agenda, but since people are asking, so at some point, and you can go, into GitHub and see the discussions, there was the idea of the two projects merging together, actually. And if I remember the details, there was an effort for creating a common library that would be like a GitOps engine. That would be like super generic, and then both projects would base like their offering on top. This never happened. I don't know all the details why. You can ask the people that were involved. I wasn't there at that point in time, but I think that one of the reasons that happened was, again, because of the differences in the ideology. Like, the ArgoCD people had something in mind, the Flux people had something in mind, and even though a common library was something good to have, this never happened. Now, whether this would happen again or not, that's another big discussion. Regarding Flamingo, first of all, I have to say I don't really like it, because for me you should either choose one or the other. Like, why use both? Make a decision in your organization and say, hey, I like, take the kitchen sink, get ArgoCD. I like to get usable blocks, get Flux, and call it a day. Connecting the projects to me sounds like a complex thing that I don't want to.
So I think by design you don't really want to go there. It's either because you acquired someone and you want transparency between the two tools or something, or maybe this is just one way to get people off of one ecosystem and taste the other people's things.
I think also it would make sense if there was a big difference between the two products. Like what was the last feature? Like a server-side apply. Like at some point, Flux had server-side apply and ArgoCD didn't have it. So you could say, oh, I like ArgoCD, but I need a specific feature from Flux. So then let's take Flamingo. But this hasn't happened. Like there isn't today something that, one or the other project is doing really, really differently than the other. And I don't know, this unique feature, you need it right now. So choose one and go forward.
Yeah. Just back to the, so they really wanted to share the core, like the GitOps engine, but I think then Flux went and just rewrote Flux for V2. So maybe that's what happened. I wasn't there either, so that's probably doesn't worth exploring more. But yeah, so you wanna show us ArgoCD?
Maybe answer to David. He's asking about Flamingo. Choose one of them. Don't ask questions about Flamingo. If you have Flux resources, use Flux. If you have ArgoCD resources, use ArgoCD. I think this is my official answer right now, unless I'm missing something. Like, if you tell me that Flamingo does X that is not possible either with ArgoCD or Flux, then yeah, that's fine. I will evaluate it and tell you what you need to know. Okay, demo. I don't have a demo ready. Let's see. Where is my screen? Okay, yeah, maybe so this. So ArgoCD has a UI, yay! So it's easy to show stuff, yay! So if you don't know about this, there is actually a public instance of ArgoCD, which is at cd.apps.argoproj.io. Maybe we can put it somewhere. It's also in the project. And it's a public instance, so it's read-only. You cannot do stuff on your own, but it's used for demos. We saw this in KubeCon, and it's also like a test bed for ArgoCD. I think all or most of the ArgoCD applications are deployed here as well. So in theory, if something breaks, we know it first. But I also have my local cluster here as well, which is running locally if we want to show some stuff. And maybe let's spend some time on the UI. And again, I will give you my personal opinion there. The UI is a major selling point for people. Like I've actually seen people choosing ArgoCD for UI specifically. Like they do an evaluation and then they come to me and say, yeah, we chose ArgoCD because it has a very nice UI and we give this to developers. And whenever I hear this, I laugh because I don't think this is a UI for developers. Maybe it's a UI for for operators or SRE or the people that are handling ArgoCD and Kubernetes behind the scenes. But hey, I don't make the decisions in the company. But it is my belief that sometimes people they are new in Kubernetes and they discover ArgoCD, and ArgoCD helps them understand Kubernetes on its own. So this is why they like ArgoCD. So here I'm looking at an application, and we are going to talk about what is an application according to ArgoCD. And you can see all the individual resources, like these are the standard Kubernetes resources that you know. This is a service, this is a deployment, this is a replica set in a pod. And as you can imagine, I can also click on it and get events and get the manifest and all this stuff. So some people abuse ArgoCD as a generic Kubernetes dashboard, which is something that I don't like. And I don't think developers should look at ArgoCD. You should have something else on top of ArgoCD because developers don't really care about all this.
Just my experience is not just some people. I think most people do this, like handing out ArgoCD read-only access because, hey, that's
so it's three different, let's say, ideologies. Some people say you build it, you run it, so we give the developers full power. Let's do what they want. And either they give them like a huge ArgoCD instance, or they get one ArgoCD instance per team. There is the other ideology that says, hey, I'm just going to give them read access. So they are going to look at the UI and to see if something is wrong, but they are not going to change anything. And then there is the ideology, which I agree that ArgoCD is an internal tool for the SRE and the operators, and developers have a developer portal or whatever you want to call that stuff, which we can talk about later as well. Because developers, I was a developer before being a developer at Kubernetes. Out of this screen as a developer, the only thing I care is this pond. That's the only thing I care. Do I care about the deployment? No. Replica sets? No.
Replica sets,
Like no. Services? No. No, I don't care about all this stuff. So you give me all this screen, and for me, I look at two places: that my application is healthy and my pod is healthy. That's the only thing I need.
Even though I know very little about ArgoCD, but the one thing is that, like, as an expert, Kubernetes expert, like the only one time I need to look at replica sets is when my service account is just not existent. That's the only situation I ever need to look at replica sets. So it's kind of, like showing all the resources, it's kind of an overkill. Yeah, that was just my thing. And I also know that in ArgoCD, maybe there is an option to hide certain resources.
Yeah, you can do 1,000 things here regarding not just resources, but categories and projects. Actually, before we go into this, let's talk about the basics. So each box that you see here is an ArgoCD application. And the ArgoCD application is a custom resource. It's a brand new resource, which if you go to the documentation, you can find exactly what it is. So you can see here, I have a custom resource and application. And even though it looks like a big file and it can have many options, it's super simple. It is just a link between a Git repo and a cluster. Boom, that's it. So every box that you see here is a link between a Git repo and a cluster. And that's the basic of GitOps. Yeah, that's it. That's the whole tutorial of ArgoCD. So you create an application and you say to ArgoCD, take whatever is in this Git folder, and I don't care if it's manifest, customize, Helm chart, JSON, app of apps, anything else, or crossplane manifests. That's another great discussion. And then apply those things in the cluster and make sure that whatever I have in Git is always in the cluster. So that's the basic. And then for each box, you can see two important points. Healthy and synced. Healthy means that the application resources are healthy right now. And this is, you can imagine like Kubernetes health checks, but something more, because you can write your own health checks for specific resources in ArgoCD. But for the simple case, let's say for a replica set, it's, when you have the number of active pods is the same as the number of desired pods. And synced, which is more interesting, says that right now, this is real-time information. Because, a lot of people ask me, how is this different than Jenkins or GitLab CI or GitHub CI? GitHub CI or Jenkins or whatever, you run a pipeline, it's green, and it's green only the time you run the pipeline. If after 5 minutes your application has failed, Jenkins doesn't know anything. Here, ArgoCD gets real-time information, and essentially Synch says that right now, what you have in Git is also the same thing that you have in your cluster. So here I've gone ahead and I have changed an application manually. So you see here, it says to me, it's out of sync. So even though the application is healthy, it's not the same as what I have in Git. And maybe you can tell me later if this view that I'm going to show you exists in Flux. I can see the components and you can see again the green stuff. So this service is not only healthy, but it's also the same as in Git. But this deployment has this yellow arrow. So something is different here, and I can press the div, and I see that somebody has made a change, like Git says that replicas is 2, cluster says that replicas is 1. And right now I have set up this application in a mode where ArgoCD will do nothing. Like it will report that there is a difference, but will not actually do anything. And then it's up to you, once you create the application, to decide and say, I want this, to report to just stay, and then I will take a decision. Or you can say to ArgoCD, no, go again and sync again what is in Git. Or you can also enable, let's say, bi-directional monitoring. ArgoCD will also monitor the cluster. So if somebody changes manually the cluster, not the Git repo, then it will do the same thing again. Everything that I talked is an option. So, you can do for the simplest thing, don't do anything, just report. Only deploy new Git changes, which is what the auto-sync option is, or overwrite both Git changes and manual cluster changes. So if I want to do it manually here, I can just press sync and synchronize, and then my change will disappear. Or I can have ArgoCD do it for me. So you see, Git says that only one replica should exist. this one was deleted. And
can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
What you essentially removed from the cluster was a manual change, right?
Yeah, in this change, and actually it's pretty funny because you can do it with ArgoCD. So even though, I have my terminal here and I have an ArgoCD CLI and I can do app list and get stuff, you can also, do kubectl edit. I think this is what I did. Like I edit something. ArgoCD on its own, remember that some people abuse it.
Yep.
You can actually click on something. And here I've seen, the live manifest, like what is in the cluster right now, the desired manifest, what I want to have. There is a diff, there is nothing here, but I could press edit. Yay, editing Kubernetes resources from the UI, which is not something that you should do. I think also goes to the discussion, I showed you existing applications, but I didn't explain how you create an application in the first place. And normally it's easy, like you press new app and you create something. No, you don't do this. So even if you can't do this, essentially you should create an application, and commit it to Git and then get things from there. So this is the same thing as the application. And there is a whole documentation page, which I'm actually amazed that I have to answer this to people. That is called declarative setup. And it has all the YAMLs for everything that you see in the UI. And this is like the proper way of doing stuff. So we were going to talk about the differences later. But one of the things that people do is they go and they add a cluster to ArgoCD because ArgoCD can manage existing clusters. And even though there is a CLI command that you can use, ClickOps, you shouldn't do this. You should go and create all the files that are expected. So this documentation page, if you're managing operator, is a must. You should read it and make sure you understand everything that is happening behind the scenes. And I would keep the UI either as read-only or at least, let's say, a way to verify stuff.
Yeah, so you can turn this off, and that should be your first step, like whatever you do.
Yeah, and then you were asking questions, about hiding things. Here you can set up, simple stuff like labels, projects, but ArgoCD has a security, let's say, RBAC system on its own, where you can split applications into projects, the clusters, create sync windows, and do stuff and say, this team can only see this cluster and can only deploy every Friday from 9 until 5. And if it's Saturday, nothing is deployed. That's a feature of sync windows. Or, you go into the UI and some applications are not even visible for you, like you don't see them. So there is also a big discussion. People ask, hey, should they have like a single ArgoCD instance for the whole organization and then add security rules, or should I just have an ArgoCD instance per team and let developers do whatever they want to do? So that's the basics of ArgoCD. Yes.
Awesome. And just latching on your last thought, like, is it usually that they have one central ArgoCD and add all the clusters there, or what's the usual blueprint?
Great. So I'm monitoring, the Slack channel of ArgoCD, and I can tell you the top 3 questions that ArgoCD people ask. Number 1 is this. So we went and actually wrote an article. Let's see if I can share it. No, I cannot share it, but just search, ArgoCD architecture code phrase. You will find several articles, and essentially it has all the options. So option number 1 is you have this central ArgoCD instance, and it manages other clusters. So this is, what some people do. Then option number 2, remember this is one also of the differences with Flux, is you have an ArgoCD cluster, an ArgoCD instance per cluster. And then you can, mix and match, like maybe you have 3 ArgoCD instances that themselves control other clusters. A good suggestion would be to have at least one ArgoCD instance for production clusters and one ArgoCD instance for non-production clusters, or multiple, like, split production and non-production. And then remember I said work for Codefresh. If you get also Codefresh, you have other stuff like a control plane, but let's not talk about Codefresh right now unless you have questions. So as always, it depends. and we have tried to make the advantages and disadvantages clear for each solution. So according to the limitations of your organization, the legislations, and whatever you want to do, you make a choice. Like some people might say, no, I want a single one because I want to manage a single ArgoCD instance. Some people say that for security reasons, I want an ArgoCD image per customer. Like imagine you work in fintech and you have 5 customers and you want each of them to be completely isolated. You get one ArgoCD instance per customer. So up to you. That was popular question, ArgoCD number 1.
So you expected this one to have?
Yeah, expected. This article I think was already open in my browser.
I feel a little played here. All right, but actually, I'm gonna be interested later on. I'm gonna read the article and see if performance is part of the cons and pros. But maybe we can just discuss that later. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right. So
I think this is enough for now, unless people have questions, and then we come back to the differences. I can show some additional stuff like application sets and stuff like this.
All right. Then I think I'm going to share my screen and going to show you the same things or same components in Flux. So I prepared just a little thing. So
terminal, boo, we want a UI, boo.
Yeah, so honestly, for a long time, people were, like Argo has a UI, let's use Argo, but let me show you something. This is a UI.
Oh.
Ooh. Maybe not as fancy as Argo, so it's mostly about tables and just rows in tables. But let me just start from the basics of Flux. So Flux is a modular, like component-based tool. So everything has a CRD, like a custom resource definition. Like you define a Git repository, which is like a little YAML piece, which is basically just a reference to a Git repository, whether that's HTTPS or SSH, and how you authenticate, and all that is captured here. And then you have different resources, like you can have Helm Releases defined also in another Kubernetes custom resource, or you can have just a regular customize or just regular plain Kubernetes YAML things defined. So there are these custom resources, and Flux is Kubernetes native by design. So basically in the cluster, there are pods running. These are controllers. Each CRD has its own controller. There is one handling the sources, one handling Helm releases, and so on. So these components are just responsible for a subset of all the things. And basically, Flux introduces a bunch of custom resources into your cluster. As you can see, you can point to OCI repositories or Helm repositories, Helm releases, Git repositories, even like S3 buckets. And with these little pieces of YAML, you can build up your application. So what we have here is actually one of the smallest examples you can see, like how to deploy an application which has some Kubernetes YAML in some Git repository. So this is pointing at a public Git repository. So if you come here and go to delivery and kubectl, you see there is a manifest YAML here. This is what you would expect from Kubernetes. There's a deployment, there's a service, blah, blah, blah. And this is basically just making the reference to Git. And this other piece, which is called the customization, I think this has the most confusing name ever. But basically, you use this to apply YAML things and customize things, both actually. So if you use this customization, refer to a source. This is the Git repository we refer to, and the path in that source, in our case, delivery/kubectl, which was the thing I showed you, it can apply this YAML on the cluster. And of course, the cluster has the application, get pods in namespace potato at kubectl. Things are applied. you can follow things in the command line, but also now Flux has a basic UI as well. You can look at these different custom resources. Sources, for example, there is the Git repository for Potato Head. This is the app I think I just showed you just a moment ago. And besides sources, there are the applications, which is kind of customizations and Helm releases lumped together. And here I should find Potato Head. Again, a bunch of rows in tables, so you can see the different Kubernetes resources that came from this customization. And I think even you can see something like remotely similar that ArgoCD has. Again, if you are curious about your replica sets state, like right there, you can see it here, which is kind of, one way to display application state, but it's rarely useful after a while. Maybe the use case you mentioned, Kost, is that people new to Kubernetes appreciate this view to understand how resources are interconnected. So this is the pod I care about. It's green, cool. So it's running there. So this is what I wanted to show, very briefly. Maybe I'm going to show you, again, how you define Helm releases. Is we can take this on, I think, later in the differences part as well. But you can define Helm repositories, like this Helm chart lives in an OCI repository, which is a new thing. And in general, Flux is very good at adopting new things in the ecosystem. So their support to new things like OCI repositories is kind of ahead of the curve always. So that I love it. Love this about Flux. Plus, Helm releases, again, they point to a source ref, which is the Helm repository, and then you can define the values. This is kind of a format where your Helm CLI, you always point like Helm update, Helm install, chart name, and then values. So all this is captured in a declarative format in this custom resource. So this is the very brief thing about Flux. And of course, you can, if I make a change and push to Git, I see these states change from ready to progressing and in synchronization and so on. I actually have just a few slides as well. I told Kostis that I will not have slides, but I lied. So I just wanted to say that, yes, we love it because it's component-based, and it's not just, platform engineers who use Flux building their internal platforms, even large companies. I think GitLab opted for Flux. So underneath or inside their agent, they have Flux doing the GitOps things. I think at some point, GitLab had its own GitOps controller, but they dropped it and opted Flux. And also Azure has the Arc tools, which also includes Flux by default. So if you are on the Azure portal and you click GitOps, I think it installs a Flux out of the box. So that people like Flux because it's, many different components. They are flexible, they are fast, they are small, they are all written in Go, and it's good to work with it and to build something larger out of these components. And there is something great happened to Flux in the V2 process. While they were heading to V2, they rewrote everything from scratch, and that's actually was, I think, after this story about sharing the common base with ArgoCD. So they went for the rewrite, and I think they benefited it greatly. So they have a small list of dependencies, and performance-wise, Flux is doing very well. So if you are on Twitter and follow the Flux chatter, you can often see Stefan, who is one of the main contributors. He's the main contributor to Flux. And he's talking about here many thousands of Kubernetes deployments and resources synchronized with Flux. And my biggest customer has like 500 deployments and stuff, and Flux is able to handle that. And I'm very pleased that Flux is able to handle this kind of scale. And also from security-wise, during this GA state of Flux, they went through an audit and they found just very few number of low-end information or severity findings. So these are the good things about Flux, and yeah, we have a UI now, so that's that can't be the only reason you are going with ArgoCD. That's what I can say here. So I guess we're going to get into more about the differences with Costis soon. So I guess this was for an intro.
Yeah, I think we can dive in. Have the basics. Let me share my screen again. And I will talk about some, let's say, common misconceptions that people have, because as you can imagine, we have some people that they came to us, they say, I'm using Flux and I want to migrate to ArgoCD. What do I do? So maybe share my screen. I've shared it.
Sorry, I'm in the front seat.
So one thing that you should know, and I'm saying I'm actually proud because I was the one that added this question in the FAQ of ArgoCD. ArgoCD, has an FAQ. Actually, let's go now. ArgoCD FAQ, and here it has like 1,000 things, but I added the question. Let's search for Helm. This one. After deploying my Helm application with ArgoCD, I cannot see it with Helm LS and other Helm commands. Yay! So we should talk about this. First of all, it's only related if you're using Helm. If you're not using Helm, forget about it. But essentially, Flux, when it installs Helm applications, it installs them as Helm applications, like it's standard Helm application, and then you can use any Helm command or any Helm tool that you use. It should be compliant, so you should look at them. ArgoCD does not do this. It instead runs Helm template, which you should be familiar with if you have worked with Helm. It takes the manifests and then installs them on the cluster. So that's a big difference, because then, as far as ArgoCD is concerned, it is just a set of manifests. The fact that they came from Helm is not really, important. So all the Helm commands will not work, and all the Helm tools will not work. Now, is this better or not? I don't know. Some people say yes, it's not. Some people say no, but you should know about this. And it's, let's say, one of the first big things that you should have in mind if you want to migrate between one of the two tools. So this wasn't in the FAQ. I added it. Now you know. But this brings me back to one of, let's say, the initial discussion about the manifest here. While Laszlo was talking, I also ran the same command that he ran, and you can see here in my cluster, it's only 3 custom resources. So it only comes back to the discussion, what are the mindsets between the two projects. So if you look at, Flux, it had many CRDs, and then you could pick and choose, while ArgoCD goes with a smaller number. And there, it makes a difference whether, you want to deploy just manifests or just customized files or just Helm files. For ArgoCD, there is no difference, absolutely. So in ArgoCD, you always create this application. That's the only resource that you have in ArgoCD. And there you say, that's my Git repo, and you don't say anything else. So ArgoCD will go into this Git repo, and it will auto-detect with a magic way and say, oh, it's a Helm chart. Let's run Helm template. Oh, it's customized. Let's run customized build. Oh, it's manifest. Let's not do anything. The application looks exactly the same. While Flux, and feel free to jump in, does the opposite thing. You clearly define, hey, this is a Git repo. Hey, it's a Helm release. Hey, it's a customization. Then you need to make a choice. And this, helps you in some ways. Like if I'm not using Helm in my organization, I can disregard all the Helm resources, that Flux has, and I can focus only on Git repos and customizations. If I'm not using customize, I can, maybe go with even less. With ArgoCD, you cannot do this. You get ArgoCD, and it supports everything. So, it's up to you what you want to do. There's an even bigger discussion in GitOps in general. It's not specific, to Flux or ArgoCD. Like some people say the tool itself should be smart, and it should use my template system. So I should have a Helm thing and pass it to Flux and ArgoCD, and then ArgoCD and Flux should do whatever they need to do with Helm and place the intelligence on the tools themselves. And there is another school of thought that says, no, the tools themselves should be super simple. They just know about manifest, like final manifest, which is what Kubernetes does. Because if you think about it, Kubernetes doesn't know anything about Helm charts by default or customizations. They are external tools. And then I will have like a pre-processing phase where I will create the manifest and I will pass them to the tools. And this discussion exists, in ArgoCD a lot. I can imagine in Flux as well. So some people say I will let ArgoCD, render the Helm chart. Some people say I will pass the manifest to ArgoCD.
So just for me to understand, if I want to deploy a Helm chart with ArgoCD, I personally have to run the Helm template or my CI or...
No. That's the alternative. So This is what I'm saying here. This would be a Helm chart. But some people say, no, I don't want ArgoCD rendering my Helm charts.
I see.
I want to render them myself with anything. Or imagine you are a company that is using a custom templating tool that is not even open source. So Flux doesn't know anything about it. ArgoCD doesn't know anything about it. So you need to go into your CI system usually and run your custom templating thing so that it can produce Kubernetes manifests, and then ArgoCD takes them over. But, just coming back to the basics, one of the big differences is that ArgoCD has a single concept, which is the ArgoCD application, and then it supports all the popular templating tools, and you can have, as you can imagine, more options here. So I could take a Helm chart that already has values and here override, my values and put whatever you want to put, which is something that I don't like, and that's another big discussion. While with Flux, you get individual resources, and you can pick and choose. So I think this is one of the first differences. And maybe, in regards to migration, I think that it makes migration to ArgoCD easier, because if you go from Flux to ArgoCD, you don't care about all this anymore. You just point an application to your Git repo and you are done. Well, if you go the other way around, you need to start asking your question, I have this software, it's a Helm chart. Okay, let's create a Helm release. It's not a Helm chart, it's customized, let's do customization. So I'm saying, and you have this on record, that I think migration towards Flux is a bit easier.
Yeah, but nobody's migrating because there's Flamingo, right?
Yeah,
so turns out this is not an ArgoCD versus Flux talk, it's an ArgoCD Flux versus Flamingo talk.
No, I think, before going into differences, this is important. And there is also another discussion, like, you have a Git repo with your manifest, and then there is the question, where do you put these files, like applications in the case of ArgoCD or Flux files in the case of Flux? And people have, suggestions say, no, you should put them in the same Git repo, but in another folder. No, you should have a separate Git repo completely, or something like this. So I have seen, people that they come to migrate to ArgoCD, and they say, what do I do with these files? And the files they show to me are the Flux resources. And I say, I don't care about the Flux resources. Where are your manifests? Show me the manifest. Like what? And they don't know. Like they don't understand that there is a level of, indirection, and that Flux is managing some other resources that you describe with Flux resources, and you need to find the source of truth, which is the manifest. Because once you find them, you know what to do with ArgoCD. So yes, I think that's important. You agree with everything that I'm saying?
Yes, I'm agreeing, and I'm just we are the same topic. Like we started out with Open GitOps, and then we were saying that both tools, in principle, do the same thing. And from Git, they put the YAMLs onto the cluster and so on. But every discussion in every Slack channel is about how to get the manifest into Git, like how to organize stuff, and that's one of my pain with GitOps in general. But that's a different discussion, I think.
Yeah, and then coming back, to the differences discussion, and I think it's important because it connects with the previous topic. Remember the mindset of ArgoCD: get the kitchensink, okay? But what if you don't like the kitchensink? You create plugins. So initially, ArgoCD said we are going to offer you configuration management plugins, and when they say configuration management, they min, Helm, customize, and stuff, because it's configuration management tools. Because they're big companies and they already had selected either another templating mechanism or they had written the custom one. So they wanted to avoid the step that you talked before. They didn't, want to run the template tool first and then pass manifest to ArgoCD. They wanted ArgoCD to have all the intelligence. So initially there was this support for config management where you could create your own config and say to ArgoCD, hey, before you apply what you find in Git, run this thing, and then the result would be manifest. So this is what was the initial implementation, and now they also extended this to any generic server plugin, and also they added support for client plugins like UI plugins as well. So you could go to a huge company where they will say, yeah, this plugin is nice, but I want, when I click on my application to have a box that shows me, I don't know, Prometheus metrics for this application. So they add a UI plugin that calls a server plugin that, does and gets whatever information it gets. So what you see is essentially a starting point. And if you're working in a big company, maybe, some people would customize this and so their own stuff. And until recently, it was a bit limited just to configuration management. Now, essentially, with introduction of, UI and server plugins, essentially, you can do everything and you can abuse ArgoCD UI again to do other stuff that you're not supposed to do.
So what kind of screen real estate would that plugin get?
So I have an example here in the public instance. I think there is already a plugin for Argo Rollouts. So we haven't talked about this. There are related projects in Argo. So Flux has Flagger for progressive delivery. Argo has Argo Rollouts. And here, if I think we go to Argo Rollouts, it's here or no, it's not here. Let me find out. Maybe it's a Canary example. Rollout demo. Okay, so it's here. And then if I click on the... so this top box also, I didn't mention, this is the application itself. But if I click on the rollout, and hopefully it loads. It's not my computer, it's the public instance. And you will see a UI specifically for rollout that says, Canary had started. And 10% and 20% and stuff like this.
I see. So it has like a rollover, and then you can do whatever here.
Yeah, I don't know why it's loading right now. I didn't test this beforehand, but it's completely custom. Yeah, you can add I think tabs on your own. Like if I go to the application here, I think you can also put another tab here. So these are the standard tabs, for that you get for free for ArgoCD, and then you can put your own tab here and show something else. So it's not, just a single integration point. It's a lot. I think there is a small number of plugins right now, and essentially, they took the existing plugins they had for something else, like Argo Rollouts, and then people can use their own. If you search the documentation, there is also documentation like how to write a plugin here. I think also you can search for ArgoCD UI plugins now. UI extensions and see how it works. So if you want to dive into this thing, you can also go there. So I think this is one of the main differences, like the extensibility. Does Flux have something like this?
So the UI is relatively new project, and it's open source.
No, I'm talking about plugins in general. Like I want to run something before Flux does its thing.
There are some post and pre-process steps in the customization, so you can define a post build like variable replace and so on. I don't use many of these, only this variable replace, so I cannot really say whether there are a large number of these pre and post process steps. Maybe I'm going to search for it actually.
Okay. So that's regarding plugins. And then the other big difference I have in my notes is application sets, ArgoCD application sets. This is one of my favorite features, application sets. So as far as I know, there isn't like a similar concept with Flux. An application set is essentially a generator for applications. That's the thing. So in Flux, it would be a generator for Helm Releases or for Git repositories or for customizations. It makes sense for you are in a big company. So if I'm a small company and I have 5 applications, I don't really care. But let's say I'm in a company where I have 10 clusters. And the usual scenario is that in these 10 clusters, either I want just some standard applications, like I always start a cluster and I always install Nginx, Set Manager, Shield Secrets, or something else. So I have, let's say, 10 applications on each cluster. I have 10 clusters. So in theory, I should create 100 applications manually. Like go and create 100 of these files and deploy them. Who wants to create manually 100 YAML files? Nobody. So what you do instead is you come in here in application sets, and this was actually a feature that originally was external to ArgoCD, and now it's merged in ArgoCD. So if you find any documentation that says you should install application sets, it's not happening anymore. You get it for free with ArgoCD. And you use generators. So there are different kinds of generators, and I can talk about them, but here is the most simple one. It's a list generator, where you have an application, and you say, look, I want this application into 3 clusters. So you come here and you put a list. This is one of the simple generators. And then this is an application set, and automatically it will create 4 applications, 3 applications for you behind the scenes and apply them to the cluster. So list is like the simple generator, but there are also generators for clusters. Remember, ArgoCD can manage external clusters, so you can connect 10 clusters and then get a generator for those 10 clusters, or Git repos or Git folders. So the classic example is you have, and actually let's show this. Let's see our live demo. So here I think I already have an application, and I have, where's my manifest? Okay, or maybe I don't have one, but I can explain what you do. Essentially, you say, take my folders, that exist there, and these are my applications. Take my clusters, and then combine them and create the combination of these. So take my 10 applications, my 10 clusters, and behind the scenes, create 100 applications, and that's how you deploy them. And as you can imagine, this feature has been super popular, and again, people want to abuse it.
Okay.
So we have questions where people say, yes, I want to deploy those 10 applications, but for that particular cluster, I want to do something different out of one of those 10.
Yes.
So people are asking to put like a smart templating language or variable substitution where you essentially put if statements. So this is not supported, and I don't think it's a good idea. Or the same thing happens with applications. Like I want these 10 applications, but for this do something else. The newer addition to this mechanism was the PullRequest Generator, which I think is super cool. One of the most common questions, remember the
preview apps,
the list of is how do I do preview environments with ArgoCD? So now you have a PullRequest Generator, and essentially you connect it to your Git provider, and you say, look, when somebody creates a brand new pull request in GitHub, take this pull request, create an application on the fly, and deploy it in the ArgoCD UI. So here, a developer, would create a pull request, and you would see the new application deployed. And usually, what people do, they have an application that it's maybe the application, a temporary database, or whatever the application needs to happen. And then once you merge or close the pull request, usually, you want to tear down that environment. So this happens automatically from this. So not many people know about this, and usually, now it's super simple because somebody asks, how do I do preview environments? And I just send the documentation link, and they say, do it like this.
Could you go back to the example where you showed me the folders, and so I just want to see, or maybe just the list.
So these are the existing generators, and the list one is the most simple one where you just hard code and say, here I have a list of things, go and generate stuff. The one I was talking about, so there is the cluster one, which is the clusters. I don't have many clusters here. But if I go to my settings, here you can see right now it's only the cluster that ArgoCD is deployed on, but here I could have like 10 clusters, which is the other one that it controls. And this is the pull request, and then Git is the one with the directories, which is my favorite, where essentially you say, go into my Git repository and get everything under that path, and these are my applications. And then what you do is you combine them. So there is a matrix and a merge generator that allows you to combine other generators. So what I was talking about is the scenario of Git directory and cluster generator. So you say, these are my clusters. There, that's the example actually. These are my clusters, and these are my folders. So I've made a decision, and in my Git repo, I've said anything under cluster add-ons, regardless of how many folders are there, I want to be deployed in all clusters. So maybe here I have 10 clusters, and here I have 10 folders. It will auto-generate 100 applications. And if I want to add a brand new application, I don't need to do anything with ArgoCD. I just go in Git into this folder, and I add an application, I commit, and then after I commit, it appears automatically. Same thing for clusters. If I add a new cluster, it will set up. So if you're in a big company and you have a large number of applications or clusters or both, I think it's a super cool feature. And the usual scenarios are these three. Like either you have a single application that you want to go to many clusters, or a single cluster that you want to install many applications, or many applications, many clusters, and do whatever you want to do.
Just the way I use Flux as well is that I don't want to create a customization for every application I have. I usually just point it to one Git repo and deploy all the folders kind of approach. So that's okay. Yeah, but this is definitely a difference because Flux doesn't have an application set kind of feature at the moment.
Yeah, coming back, to the previous discussion regarding manifest, a lot of people right now think that application set is a black box. Like, I have this file, I commit it to Git, ArgoCD creates my applications, but I don't have a nice way to preview what it will create. Like maybe I want to see those 100 applications, and maybe I even want to process them. So maybe I want to I have a security policy or a controller inside Kubernetes that I want, to do some checks, and I want a fancy way to preview what is going to be created before it's created. So right now there is an open issue where people are asking, hey, I would like to either run a command or make a call or do something that renders this application set into many applications so that I can see what is happening, same discussion as before. So I think after you have this, it would be super cool because you could have like a developer changing this or an operator, and you could create a pull request and attach the rendering. So then people could see, oh, this is, what it will happen before I merge this, and I make sure that, yes, it's my clusters and my applications. And all
that's cool.
So PullRequest Generator, do you have this in Flux? No.
Not in Flux per se. So I think Weaveworks has an enterprise addition to Flux, which I just recently start discovering, and I think they have a GitOps set, which is kind of the application set concept with the generators and so on. But the open source Flux does not have it. No.
I think also, somebody from the audience can correct me. This is one of the nice things with ArgoCD. Like initially, this was created by Red Hat, if I remember correctly. Like Red Hat, because they have big customers, they said, let's create an application set. And the application set was a separate controller. So, they created it, and then they said, okay, let's make it compatible with ArgoCD. So they started talking about this feature. Even today, there is a separate Slack channel called application set in the CNCF Slack. And at some point in time, you had to install like ArgoCD and the application set controller in order to make this work. And then people said, okay, this is super useful. Why, have this like an external tool? And there was an effort that merged this with ArgoCD. So now you install ArgoCD and you get this out of the box. So I think it's a nice example, of something that started as an external project, then it was working along with ArgoCD, and now it's part of ArgoCD. And there is also a similar scenario with, I think Flux also has it, image detector. What's it called in Flux?
Image update something.
So there is an external controller in Flux that it monitors Docker registries, correct?
It's not an external controller. It's part of the existing controllers. But yes, so you can.
But it's optional. Like I can install Flux with or without
it. I think it's part of the controllers, but you have to configure your resources in a way that it's going to be updated if there's a new Helm chart version or if there's a new version.
So that's a similar idea. So if you search at Argo image updater, yeah. This today it's an external project right now, which is compatible, let's say, with ArgoCD, and now we have reached the point where people saying, "Oh, this is very useful. We need this. Why it should be separate?" And there is an open issue to integrate this into ArgoCD as well, like to make it build into ArgoCD. And I think at this point also we can answer a very common question as well, which is Argo Project Labs. So here you can find stuff that are incubating for ArgoCD, and there are lots of cool projects. I will mention this one. So this one was actually started by the company I work for, Codefresh, because some people were asking, okay, ArgoCD is great for applications. How do I install and manage ArgoCD itself? So that's an open source project that installs ArgoCD and then automatically sets it up to manage itself with GitOps. So it's GitOps all the way.
Yeah. It's
so
actually
go to Project Labs and look at the projects there.
Yeah. With Flux, that has been the case from day one. So we are updating Flux with Flux, which is kind of a great concept.
But wait, with Flux, with the CLI, with Flux CLI, or with commits?
No, with commits. So I have the Flux manifest in the GitOps repository, and Flux is listening that same repository. So if
and this was also the case for Flux V1 as well.
It was possible, and I have been doing that with V1 as well. So the CLI is there for bootstrap and stuff, but I think you just have to put Flux as well into GitOps because it's gonna make your life easier.
Question about So that's another big topic. That's another part of the common questions we get. So essentially the question is about ordering applications and Helm charts. First of all, something that not many people know, and we get this question as a lot, is what is the default order? Like, what if I have an application, what happens? And if you search the documentation, ArgoCD, I assume Flux as well, is following the same order as Helm itself. Like Helm has if you look at the Helm source code, there is a section that is hard-coded and says install, I don't remember, this namespace first, the service account first, something, and then it reaches like the deployment at the end. So that's what Flux is doing out of the box. Then people wanted to change this. So initially, Argo said, we are going to give you sync hooks, which are not exactly the same as the depends keyword in Flux. And essentially, it gives you 3 phases out of the box. So normally, all your applications, by default, they go to the sync phase. So everything runs there. But you also get a pre-sync hook phase and a post-sync hook phase. So if you want, let's say, I don't know, a job to run before everything, you put that job in the pre-sync hook. And if you want to run some unit tests or smoke tests, you put it there. And then people didn't think that this was enough. So they said, let's add another feature. So they introduced ArgoCD sync waves. Where here you just go to any resource and you put a number, and then ArgoCD orders the resources according to the number. Lower numbers go first, so you can do whatever you want. You can combine phases and waves as well if you want, and then the waves take effect on each phase. So if you combine both, this number is scoped to phase. I don't think you should do this. If you use waves. But I'm still talking about individual resources. So the question is actually about applications. So ArgoCD has another concept, which is called ArgoCD App of Apps. And it's here, or they moved it. Yeah, the App of Apps. So essentially, this box, if you remember, is the ArgoCD application that we already saw. And then if you want, you can put them into an ArgoCD application. So this is what happens. Like in normal CD, let's say, capability, you have a set of Kubernetes resources, and then you point ArgoCD to the folder on the Kubernetes resources. But if you have a folder with applications, and then you can also point ArgoCD to the folder that has applications. So then you create a super ArgoCD application that has ArgoCD applications. And then if you do this, you can define ordering with some resources, but the process is not that simple because you need to do some additional stuff. So there is a great article that my colleague wrote, because it's a very popular question. So if you search ordering app of apps ArgoCD, I think this would be the first hit. Yes, Codefresh blog, your best resource for ArgoCD stuff. This is by Christian, a very good friend. He's not with Codefresh anymore, which describes exactly this idea of ordering stuff, and it shows all the building blocks and how you do it. And remember that, because in ArgoCD the application is generic, like it's not something that works only, with Helm or customize. You don't really care about this. So you can take your Helm charts. Here there's an example where you want, the database to be deployed first, then the backend, and then the front end. And that's how it works. And it uses sync waves plus a health check. Actually, we can talk about health checks a bit for application. So that's how you do it. You read the article, and this is how you do it. I would like to say, and this is like personal opinion, but since we are among friends here, we can talk about this. If you're doing this, essentially you have an anti-pattern. You shouldn't care about the order of your applications. Your applications should be smart enough let's say recover on their own. So if you imagine like the typical microservice application where I have a database, a front end, a back end, a queue, and whatever, if your developers are working correctly, you should deploy them in any order, and then the application, the microservices will complain and say, I don't find the DB, I don't find the worker, I don't find. But as soon as things start to come up, everybody should recover, and in the end, you should have a working application. And actually, Kubernetes is designed for this. Like if you look at how Kubernetes works, there isn't any like specific ordering. Like Kubernetes doesn't have an application object. I think by design, that groups stuff and then defines orders. It has just individual pods and deployments, and it's up to you to do the ordering. But the idea that you have a controller and it syncs stuff continuously, which is what GitOps is doing, and it started for Kubernetes, like Kubernetes controller, it implies that you don't care about the order anymore. So you submit your stuff, and then you wait, and that after 10 minutes, not 30 seconds, because it will take time, basically everything should be up and running. So the article essentially is a workaround. If you don't control the source code, then you cannot talk to your developers, but you should talk to your developers first and explain to them that they should match the order. And I guarantee that every programming framework out there, Java, Node, Ruby, whatever, it should have some kind of capacity that recovers from mistakes. So instead of saying I'm going to open my database connection in the beginning, and then if it fails, okay, disaster happens. No, I'm going to start looking at the database, and maybe every 10 seconds I try to connect again and create a connection pool, and same goes for queues and external systems and all this stuff. So do this first, And I think this is also part of the discussion that you should do with the developers anyway, because as soon as you migrate to Kubernetes and you have multiple pods, you need to ask the developers, hey, can the application actually run into multiple instances? That's another good question, because you can have some monoliths that they lock specific resources or they open specific files, and it works great when it's a monolith, and then you put it into Kubernetes and it doesn't work. So that's part of the same discussion.
I agree with you in principle, but this hack people can put in place in a day, just relying on themselves and not having the 3 months long re-architecture.
It shouldn't be a re-architecture. First of all, your developers should know about this, the 12-factor app. Okay, I'm starting a different discussion there, but I think it's important.
And I'm agreeing with you. It's just there are managers on Earth as well, and they're just going to say just make it work. Let's go. Whatever.
Yeah, but I'm saying that there is a trick that you can pass all this discussion to the cloud native migration. So at some point, your organizations should have like a budget for cloud native migration, and there you should have all these discussions, including application ordering. So instead of starting a brand new discussion when it's too late, when you say, okay, I'm going to the cloud or to Kubernetes or to whatever you want to go, you say, okay, let's see what needs to happen in the application, and application ordering should be one of those things that are happening there. Okay, so I know this is probably not the answer that you were looking, but I think it's important to mention it.
We have to keep, resurface this 12-factor app every once in a while for people to, keep it top of mind. Actually, so the question was about the depends on keyword in Flux, which is exactly for this. You can define multiple of these customization resources, and you can say that this deployment should happen before the other deployment. So you can build essentially like a tree. Yeah, if you go to the customized controller docs, I have it pulled up. So if I share my screen, I think I can show it quickly. So it's basically this depends on. So you remember these customization resources. There are 2 of them here. And then the second one is actually saying that cert manager has to be in place before I actually install my certs. So even though for applications you have to have the discussion, I think there are a couple of things in the infrastructure space, be that maybe CRDs need to come first, then the actual resource definitions and so on. And I have a few more technical examples, like when this depends on actually helps in Flux. I think we're going to talk about the inline variable substitution feature there as well. This depends on feature is you kind of have to have it, otherwise Flux may try to apply sooner that the actual values are in the cluster. So that's just maybe for later.
I also wanted to ask, and maybe you can share my screen now. This out of sync thing. Does Flux have it?
So Flux talks about drift detection in more places than I'm aware of. So this bi-directional thing, obviously from Git, it synchronizes to the cluster. But if you change something manually on the cluster, I think by default, Flux has like a sync interval every 5 minutes, every 1 hour, every day, and it just overwrites anything that you do manually in the cluster. So that's their default approach to this kind of problem. But I'm going to do some homework after this stream, because, for example, in Flux, there is the Terraform controller, which does drift detection in a similar fashion. So it is able to tell the difference between the Terraform source files and the cloud state. So maybe there is something similar for Kubernetes YAMLs, but I haven't been practicing this with Flux. So the default behavior there is just overwrites whatever you did manually, which could be kind of annoying. And that's why I have my sync interval set to a day. So if I do some cowboy stuff, like the overwrite interval, sorry, not the sync interval, but the overwrite interval. So if I do cowboy stuff, then and I'm aware of that I'm doing the cowboy stuff, then I should be able to do that. But I need to do my homework. This is kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, we have companies saying different things when they come to us, and most people say yes, this sync feature is nice, but for production specifically, I don't want anything automatic to happen. So usually people will say, yeah, this auto sync stuff is great for non-production environments, but they make my production work like this, where ArgoCD just reports that there is a difference, and then I know we need to take a decision and decide what will happen. And actually, I think if we search for ArgoCD sync options, you can find all the different settings that you can choose, not only with the sync policy, but also other stuff. But a very popular question is how do I disable this auto sync stuff for production, so that I get the best of both worlds. So for non-production environments, just deploy as soon as something happens, and maybe overwrite my changes, or the other way around. Like even for non-production environments, I expect people to go into the cluster and do cowboy hacks, and I assume that if they are doing cowboy hacks, they need them for some reason. So don't overwrite their manual changes. But in production, maybe I am under legislation or something, and I have very strict rules, and I always want to have a clear audit log that whatever happened in Git was also applied in my cluster. So I don't want any manual changes in production. So there, go and remove them. So in order to keep everybody happy, there are all these options that you can select and decide what you want to do.
Actually, so even though you can suspend a synchronization in Flux, so you can say that please don't reconcile this app anymore. So there's this suspend flag in Flux. So in theory, you can have the same behavior as in ArgoCD. It just feels or always felt odd to me that my Git state is not what is on the cluster. So Flux's default state is that suspend is false. So if it keeps reconciling Git state to the cluster, and I actually do the guards on like what gets into Git. But once it is in Git, it goes in the cluster. So that's sort of, again, some philosophical differences, and people have different opinions about this.
Yeah, so this is... So I have to say, I have to admit here that ArgoCD is not the main project I'm working on. Usually I work with Argo Rollouts, but I work with ArgoCD also because it's popular. And this big discussion comes with Argo Rollouts, and I assume with Flagger as well, because people ask the question, hey, I have applied something, and then Argo Rollout said, oh, no, your metrics say there is a disaster, and they roll back. Exactly. Yeah. Now, what do? Do I write back in Git, or do I don't write back in Git, or should I write back? And as you can imagine, in the FAQ page of Argo Rollouts, I have added, I guess, the specific questions. And you can imagine there are two kinds of people there. People that say, hey, you need to follow GitOps by the book. To the so if a rollback happens, here, there is a list of questions I answered. If a rollback happens, you should write in Git right away, make sure that everything is the same. And then there is another school of thought, which I tend to agree with, that says, hey, this is temporary. When a production deployment failed, something bad happened. So you should look at it. It's okay for 5 minutes, your cluster and your Git repo say something different, but you're expected to make a fix, commit again, and then everything should be okay. But for those 5 minutes, yes, you're not following, GitOps.
Exactly.
And that's fine, and that's okay.
I'm there with you in that problem space. Yes, I'm agreeing. Actually, so the Helm controller in Flux has a similar issue, because the Helm controller follows a different life cycle. So one thing is that the Helm release was applied on the cluster, but then the Helm controller starts, trying to reconciling and doing the Helm upgrade. And sometimes things can happen there. So you can even like roll back your Helm releases with Helm, and then your Git doesn't really have the same state as with as your cluster. So yes, there are some diversion from GitOps, and it comes down to personal preferences in many cases.
Maybe you want to share your screen and talk about the feature that Flux has and ArgoCD doesn't have, the replacing of values.
Oh, yes.
Stuff.
Yeah, so
Hit us.
Yes, you have seen this before. Helm repository points to an OCI registry, and then Helm release uses this repository and then applies some values on it. That's, like everything verbatim in Git. This is what happens. But sometimes you want to be more, you want to configure stuff differently. So there are actually a couple of ways to change this, just simply defining the values in YAML kind of approach. So here again, there is a Git repository. Here I'm using a Git-based Helm chart. So you don't have to have like a web-based Helm repository or an OCI registry. You can just point to any Git repo for your chart source code, which is kind of helpful in many cases. So here the Helm release is pointing to the Git repository. That's just another cool stuff. But the values have something interesting here. It has a variable. And here I set the memory limit to some value. And this value is, or this replacement, I typically use it with secrets maybe. So where this variable is resolved is actually happening on the cluster. Because Flux is running in the cluster and it has access to different config maps and so on, or secret resources. So I can define this value maybe somewhere else, and upon apply, it's going to be reconciled, combining the Git state with this variable value. So in this specific case, the question is, how does this Helm release come to life in the cluster? There is another resource which is deploying everything in this Git repository. And in the post-build phase, so Flux gets everything from Git, and before it applies, it actually does variable substitution. In this case, it's based on a config map, but this could be a secret as well. So if I'm gonna do this, kind secret, and then, I don't know, infra secrets, it's a very nice feature because once things are applied, suddenly the value of the secret is injected here. So some people can define the values even without knowing the actual secrets. So there is some decoupling and some options for workflow niceness in workflow possibilities in your organization. So it does basic string replacement. So I think if you want to do some multi-line strings and stuff, that doesn't really work. And it might be able to do this bash style things, like, bash is able to replace strings here and there. I'm not quite sure about that. But if I go post build substitute, it actually can do positional and other kind of replacements as well. So like what you are expecting from bash string replacement functions, it is able to do. So look for spec post build substitute, and then the substitute from gives you some options, whether that's a config map or a secret. So that's a very interesting thing, because Helm charts can have the long values files, and sometimes the Helm chart itself doesn't have the option to refer to existing secrets, which sometimes is making people's lives hard. But then you can use this inline substitution feature, which is very handy. This is just loosely related. Another great feature I like from the Helm release is that I can provide my values in here, like spelling every letter out, or I can just refer to a config map or a secret, or just refer to a secret which is just overwriting a Helm value, a specific subfield, like a TLS certificate. So this gives me quite a lot of options when Helm charts are limiting. Helm charts, all quirky here and there, but these two techniques make my life not miserable, if I can say that. Is it clear, Kostis, to you what is going on?
Yeah, so I will say two things. First of all, the facts, and then my personal opinion. So what was just shown, ArgoCD, doesn't have in such, let's say, extensive way, there is some very little templating for application sets, and also for the other subsystem for notifications, but not something generic for that. If you also share my screen, ArgoCD also has a very controversial feature, which is called the parameter overrides, which actually you can see there is actually a warning here. Many consider this modern operation as anti-parameter. So the idea is that you can, override stuff and not save it anywhere. Like you can do this literally in the UI. If you start an application, here, if I create my own application, after I put, the required parameters, I could override here, and if it's a Helm chart, it auto detects and allows me to put values. This is not something that you should do. But even if you forget about this feature, in my mind, and this is my suggestion, you should have a clear separation of everything. So there should be a Git repo for the source code, and only the source code. Most people agree on that. Then there should be a Git repo or folder, I don't really care, for manifests or Helm charts or whatever you use for Kubernetes, which should be self-contained. And then you should have a third Git repo or folder, I don't care, for ArgoCD resources or Flux resources. But those features essentially couple the last two things, like you have a Flux resource or an ArgoCD resource that overrides value from the Helm charts or other stuff that comes from the second category. And you can do fancy stuff there, but it's not something I consider. Ideally, imagine, you have Flux and you want to migrate to ArgoCD. If you're using this mechanism a lot, it should be, super hard to find how you do it with ArgoCD. So in my mind, I would like, to keep things simple and have as less templating as possible. There are even some companies, remember the legislations and fintech, that they should say you should have a clear view on what is in the cluster right now. And I want in Git the final result, like no templating, no calculation, no nothing. I should have not a single file, but a single view of what is in the cluster. And if an auditor comes in and asks what is in the cluster right now, you should just point there and say, this is what in my cluster, instead of saying, this is a template that I run something and take stuff and calculates, and then it shows me what is in the cluster. So that's my personal opinion. I can understand that some people like it because it helps a lot, maybe, during the initial implementation or how you manage the applications. But there is, again, a fine line between the flexibility that this templating gives you versus, let's say, the capacity to clearly express what is in the cluster in the most simple way possible, and to always have stuff in Git, and not, have pre-processing and post-processing stuff. So I think that makes my my view. Yes.
There was one thing that I didn't fully understood, that the Helm values are sort of meant to be overwritten. So I'm not sure what you said about.
They are, but for me they should be overwritten, personal opinion, from another Helm values stored in Git. You should have a hierarchy of Helm values. Everything should be a value. And if I want to override something, I should look at a file, not a pre-processing mechanism that combines multiple value files and creates a final thing. And then it's super clear to me what is happening, and creating the end result is also super clear. You don't actually need a fancy tool. You just need a way, you can do it in your mind, to merge this and say this Helm value stays the same because it's in the parent file, while this value is overwritten. That's my personal opinion of how things
in principle, I agree. I think the couple of use cases where it came handy was when, again, the Helm chart had some limitations, like I wanted to use an existing secret for TLS certificates because, hey, that's just can't be in Git, so it has to come somewhere else, and that usually comes from an operator and created in the cluster, and sometimes those Helm charts don't make it possible to refer to secrets to any specific field or to some fields. And of course, you can make contributions to the Helm chart and upstream your changes and stuff. But in those cases, this was a lifesaver. So that's one use case. And in that case, or in this case, actually the value is in Git, or so you can really follow what's going on. The other thing, which I haven't done personally, but some people, especially in like a disaster recovery scenarios or multi-cluster situations, they injected a little config map into the cluster, telling the cluster's identity, like who am I? I don't know, US East, I don't know, X, Y, Z. And when they applied the same YAMLs on multiple clusters, actually the behavior was somewhat different because each cluster knew its identity. So in that case as well, I think this could be helpful.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's okay. As I said, it's you need to find the sweet spot between what you want to do and how you want things to be expressed.
Yep.
Let's answer, because before we get into the next one, let's answer a really quick question about a playground and how you can play with all this. So if we're talking with ArgoCD, if you just want to look at ArgoCD, as I said, you can do it here. But it's super simple to install it on your own. So the instance you see here is actually on my own cluster, like it's running a local cluster. I think it's, Docker for desktop. So you get a cluster for free with Docker for desktop. And then I'm guessing both ArgoCD and Flux as well, they are not that heavy applications. So it's perfectly fine, to run them on a laptop and play around with them. That's super simple. I mean, it depends also on the applications you deploy, because, if you say I want to deploy 10,000 applications on my local laptop, it will not work. But just for playing around, it's super, super easy to do. So that's my suggestion. Use your local laptop and a local Kubernetes cluster, because you need a Kubernetes cluster as well.
Yep.
And then you don't need to depend on any cloud provider.
Yeah. There is something Engin was commenting about handling CRDs, and I'm not an expert of this topic, but recently I updated a CRD from version 1 to version 2, and that was actually Flux itself, and it just worked. I don't know how, but I did it on 15 clusters, but it was just working, and I was so pleased about this complex topic just to work out of the box.
Since we have Engin here, I think we need to talk about this. It's great to also mention that Pulumi has a GitOps operator as well. Yay for doing GitOps with infrastructure. So this is another big topic. GitOps Pulumi. It's brand new, I think, or at least, Pulumi operator. Okay, so we are talking about Pulumi now, but there is another popular question: how do I use ArgoCD to manage infrastructure? And there are several, approaches there. You already talked about the Terraform controller. The example I have actually here is Crossplane. So that's another nice demo. This is an infra repo. It's a repo that doesn't hold Kubernetes resources like standard Kubernetes resources. It holds Crossplane resources. So this is an RDS database, and it's represented by a resource. And this is an S3 bucket. So Crossplane, if you're not familiar with Crossplane, you should be crossplane.io. Even though they are not like a GitOps tool, they made sure that their tool plays well with ArgoCD and Flux as well. And it gives you a way to map non-Kubernetes applications, non-Kubernetes resources to Kubernetes CRDs, and then just apply them like any other Kubernetes resources. So usually what you do is you get Crossplane and ArgoCD, or Crossplane and Flux. And I think if I see my example, because I was working on this earlier on, you describe your stuff using the familiar way of doing GitOps. So I think it's this folder. Yeah. So this is a manifest which represents an RDS instance, not a standard Kubernetes object. You can see it's Upbound is the company behind Crossplane, and it represents an instance, and this is like a bucket. So when you apply this with ArgoCD, essentially you create those resources. You can do the same thing with Flux, and some people use I think it's called not Terraform controller. There are 3 or 4 Terraform controllers for this. There is also Crossplane and Pulumi Gitops operator. So if you want to do Gitops with everything, now you can. There is no excuse.
You can
define engine. I'm working for you. Okay, you're writing concepts, and I'm working for you.
And he's working for me. He just posted another comment about another niceness in Flux about Helm. Helm, I think, doesn't really want to solve the CRD question, like how to update CRDs and so on. And Engin says that Flux did a great job bridging this gap. So if you are into this problem, you might want to look at this create replace function inside Helm Releases.
Yeah, as a reminder, if you're watching this recording after 6 months, it is obsolete. Both projects have progressed. So check the dates.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. We have maximum 19 minutes left. Is there anything else we wanted to cover today?
I wanted to expand a bit on the last point, and this was actually the beginning discussion. I see many companies, and they already have a huge investment in Terraform, and they manage their infrastructure in Terraform, and then they say, okay, now I will go to Kubernetes and I will use ArgoCD or Flux for my Kubernetes resources. And they still stay within, those two words. Like they say, I'm going to take Terraform for infrastructure, and after I create the cluster, I will use ArgoCD or Flux. And that works great. I mean, if you have a huge investment on Terraform, that's fine. But we need to say today that there is the other option of, going into Kubernetes like the whole way, 100%, and then you use the Pulumi operator or Crossplane or the Terraform controller or whatever, and then you say, okay, I like Kubernetes so much, or I like the idea of having controllers that have a sync process and a sync loop, and I want to apply this process to everything. There is a way to manage infrastructure with ArgoCD and Flux, and then you have a uniform way of, doing everything with GitOps. So if you like GitOps as a concept, and you should, because it's great, you can manage everything with GitOps right now, instead of thinking that GitOps is only for Kubernetes, or it's only for controllers, or it's only for cloud applications. No, it's not. The last presentation I did in ArgoCon actually was great. You can find the recording, but essentially I explained how you can how you can manage database migrations with Kubernetes and with GitOps. GitOps Ariga Kubernetes Atlas. There. So that's another open source project that I really like, which is an operator for database migrations specifically, and you can use ArgoCD or Flux. I think they all see here, there,
yes,
yeah, that you can use.
And it's identical basically when you were clicking back.
Yeah, it's the same. That's the whole point of GitOps. There is also another option that you should check, which is Schema Hero. These two are competitors, but I personally like this, and I'm going to say it because Schema Hero is not the main business of the company behind it. Like, it's an external project that they created on their own, and then they gave it to the world. They're not, selling it or supporting it in any way. While this company, Ariga, it's a company specializing on database migrations. Like, this is their bread and butter. But the idea is the same. I'm not going to talk about this too much. But if you like GitOps, you can extend this way to many things. So now we have talked about, ArgoCD and Flux for Kubernetes resources. We have talked about infrastructure, like databases and S3 buckets and clusters. And now we're talking about database migrations, and they all work exactly the same way. So you can imagine, as a scenario that a developer comes to you and they say, I want a brand new application, and you want to create a cluster, you want to create a database, you want to put a schema in the cluster, in the database, and some initial data and the namespace, and then also set it up with the PullRequest Generator, to create preview environments for that. You can do this all with GitOps today, right now, if you want to. And then you say, look, I have a single tool for everything. I've learned everything and get all the benefits of GitOps on all these aspects. So the major, if you ask me, is drift detection. So you can get drift detection in all these aspects and say, now I know that not only, my pod is what is described in Git, but I know that my bucket matches what is described in Git, and I know that my database schema matches what is described in Git, and I have this guarantee by the controller, and I can add stuff, and I can do stuff, and I can do this with the same way. I think if you search for ArgoCon GitOps for databases, it's this one. Okay, just search and you will find the presentation. You should also, if you are interested in Argo, find all the presentations for ArgoCon. This is what I wanted to say. GitOps everywhere. Don't think that GitOps is just for Kubernetes. Go all the way, and in most cases, it should work the same way for Flux and ArgoCD. I think this was a great example. I didn't have this
exactly
in mind, but it shows exactly this idea that if you're following GitOps and you follow the Kubernetes API, you get access to all the tools that work with GitOps and the Kubernetes API.
This was a lovely summary, Kostis. I think we can conclude here.
Wait, if they have more questions, they can find us where? You have the emails in the first slide?
Exactly. No? I'm going to find the first slide.
Or maybe edit the slide.
No, I actually don't have emails, but I'm going to post it.
Yeah.
On I'm going to add it to the YouTube notes and also.
Yeah. So I'm Kostis, my first name at codefresh.io. Codefresh.io. There are several other topics that we didn't cover because it wasn't this webinar, but Codefresh has an enterprise product on top of Argo, so there are several questions not answered by Argo or Flux. But that's another discussion. But if you want, talk about GitOps or enterprise or infrastructure, send an email, and you can find me there.
Cool, Kostis. Thank you very much. I was Laszlo, and you find my name next to this stream. And yeah. Awesome. I think I have some things to check about Argo. So thank you very much. I did learn a few things here. And honestly, this was a great celebration of GitOps, and just for people to know that if they are doing GitOps, they are probably on the right track. And there are many things to follow up after this stream. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. And Kostis, as always.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Exactly. That's just, these are just facts. All right. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone. Take care, everyone, and have a great day. Goodbye.
Bye.